Welcome to another episode of Axe of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me, as always, my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
Hello, Kat. I was just saying that I can't wait to make Eric read all my Final Fantasy VI fan fictions and essays and everything that I've collected and written as a longtime fan and lover of Final Fantasy VI. Just gestating in my closet, just waiting to just spring it upon him.
Gestating.
I was so ready for that until you got to gestating, and then it was like the little.
It was the verb that popped into my head. I couldn't think of anything else.
Also joining me is my equally lovely co-host and new Final Fantasy VI superfan, Eric Van Allen.
Yeah. My love for it is early in the gestation period, but we are pretty deep into it now. We are post World of Ruin, and I kind of get it why this game hit the way it did back then, even the way it does now. Yeah, that game it goes for it. Yeah.
This week we'll be talking about Visions of Mana, another Square Enix joint. And Secret of Mana was a contemporary of Final Fantasy VI, but Visions of Mana, this is the first mainline Mana game since 2006's Dawn of Mana. Does it hold up? We'll be talking about that in this week's episode, along with all of our other usual segments. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod. Just $1 a month will get you access to the Discord and the show ad-free, and your generous support allows us to continue doing this show. We've been doing it for 3 years at this point as a Patreon, and many more episodes before that. And we are very appreciative of our community, especially our generous Stars of Destiny who are joining us today in the Discord. And this week we're joined by Anthrax Bees, Criminal Justice, Drew RWX, Flashback 2012, Harvest Lunatic, Robo Riley, Spooky Man BR, and Spyrus. In terms of Patreon episodes, we just released a new Pantheon episode that you should go check out. It's Shining Force 2, the classic Sega Genesis strategy RPG, recommended to us by our intrepid mod, Brian C. Nerd. It was a great combo that went almost 2 hours. We covered a large part of the history of that game and why it is appealing, and also the impact of Sega Genesis RPGs. That's out now, and we have already started our next Pantheon episode, or should I say Pandemonium episode. Yes, it's going to be RPG hell through most of October as we play Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Okay, let's move on now to our review of Visions of Mana, available now on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, and Xbox Series XS. It was developed by Uka Studios, a subsidiary of NetEase, opened in January 2020, that unfortunately seems to be winding down. It's the first mainline entry since 2006's Dawn of Mana, and it has numerous of serious veterans, including Masaru Oyamada, Akan, Koichi Ishii, the series creator, and Hiroki Kikuta, Secret of Mana's composer. The storyline stars Vaughn, who is escorting a group of alums to the Mana Tree to renew the flow of mana into the world by sacrificing their souls. In other words, it's a Final Fantasy X. The plot is described a bit as simple. Nadia, Eric, both been playing it. Nadia, you're the Mana fan here. You're the big-time Mana fan. Share your thoughts.
Well, for starters, I'm going to correct you and say that Secret of Mana started the tradition of delivering a sacrifice before Final Fantasy X. The plot for the very first game, Final Fantasy Adventure / Seiken Densetsu, the characters in that game, which were localized to Fuji and Sumo, unfortunately, they very closely resemble Val and what's her name? Hina.
Yeah.
In character and roles and looks. So I haven't finished the game yet, but I can kind of see where things are going in that regard, because in the first game, spoiler alert, she turned the female character Fuji turns into the mana tree, while the male character Sumo is, the protector or whatever the hell. But the point is, he loses her because she has to become the mana tree. She has to be sacrificed in this particular area of the world, or else the mana will dissipate. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, it definitely came long before Final Fantasy X. I just had to get that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been told Nadia is the queen. Yes, I have been. What do you like the game? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely like the game very much. I just met Waluigi Squirrel. He's
what?
There is it's funny. The plot is kind of simple, but at the same time engaging. Like, Mana has always been about very simple but very strong themes, and I think they're delivering well in that regard here. It's I like the gameplay. I am a little bit confused by things like the class shifting. I don't think that sort of thing was done very well, because a lot of you get the mana vessels quite slowly, so you don't get to explore with a bunch of job changes all at once like you would in Final Fantasy V, for example. And there are weird problems with this game in terms of the UI. Like, for example, you summon the Picools using like L1 and square, and you'd think, okay, you do the same thing to get off them, but no, it's always like you have an action for a button for one thing, and then for the opposite thing, like, say, get off a mount, you have another button. And to me, that makes no sense. That's driving me up the wall. So there's a lot of little problems like that I could see kind of bring down the experience for people who aren't Mana sickos like myself. But as a Mana sicko, I think they really nailed the look, the sound, the feel. It's definitely kind of got that quality of BRPG. This is definitely made with the PS4 in mind, but with kind of the nostalgia for simpler games that take you back to like that PS3, PS2 era. I think is fantastic for that, especially like maybe you don't want an action RPG that's as complex as Twilight Princess. And I don't know, I think it's the atmosphere and the music and just this, even the simplicity but weight of the battle system kind of carry it for me, and the story. Like, I'm a little bit surprised by how invested I am in the story with, as I said, Squirrel Waluigi trying to ruin a kingdom that I'm trying to help out in. It's like the idea of alms being delivered to the Mana Tree as a way to save the world. People know this is screwed up in this world, and they're kind of lashing out in their own ways about it. And like with the squirrel character, she's a very like proper princess. Do you remember her name?
Palomina.
Palomina. Her whole thing is like, okay, well, for example, I'm selected to be an alm, but what's going to happen to my kingdom? My Waluigi squirrel uncle is crazy. He's a traditionalist. He's going to want to bring the kingdom back to its like, its feudal roots or whatever. And so that's the kind of thing these characters are asking themselves. Like the Earth tried to run away because she was in love with someone in the Earth, the Earth world, in the Earth realm. It didn't work out. She didn't want to be an alm. Oh well, you die, and everyone kind of dies with you because you did that. And so it's not all. It's not perfect. The only people who aren't really questioning what's going on are Val and the and Hina, which is starting to also break down because they're like, oh, maybe. There's a very sad scene actually I just got where Val wants to buy Hina a pendant as a gift, and she's like, well, what am I going to do with it? So I'll be gone when I reach the Mana Tree. And he kind of buys it for her anyway, and that was just really sweet. I like that.
New Patreon tier unlocked. Nadia describes video games.
You're welcome.
I would definitely subscribe at that level. The thing that stood out to me about this game immediately is, even though I wouldn't exactly call it the most technically amazing looking RPG, it is still striking to look at. It's fun to look at in that kind of a 3D mana sort of approach. And I'm wondering what you think, Eric. How do you feel about the graphics and things like that?
Yeah, so I'm like near the end of the game. I think I'm in the final chapter right now. And I will say that the looks, like not just like the graphical fidelity, like how the light and ray tracing looks or whatever, I think that's fine, but it's really like the art direction that really strikes me in this game. I think people who love the look of a Mana game are really going to find a lot here to enjoy, because I think there are some just pretty stunning areas at times. They really know how to make a a good vista, and I've really enjoyed that. And then some of the boss monsters are also very impressive too, where they really captured that like kind of goofy, almost cartoonish, like I think vaguely Toriyama adjacent.
Can I actually,
even like,
sorry, interrupt to ask you a question, Eric. 'Cause I'm actually very curious.
uh-huh.
As someone who's not really that familiar with Mana, would you say the Mana world as it is now feels like an actual established, lived-in kind of world that has its own set of rules and races and is just a place that exists within the game, if you know what I mean? It feels lived in?
I don't know if I'd say it feels lived in, because I think it does have the problem that a lot of like smaller scope, smaller tier RPGs have, where like every NPC exists because they need to give you a quest or something, and so like
the boring quest,
and so the only characters that exist in the world are the ones that are there to serve like a function, and so you don't really have like big bustling cities or anything like that. You're in like I think the largest town you're probably going to see in this game is the water one. And
yeah, I'm in there now.
It's there are definitely people there doing things, but it's not like a bustling square, even comparable to something like, again, Final Fantasy X we talked about, and like 10 did a good job of like trying to make that city feel lived in, even though it didn't have a lot of NPCs scattered about. I think this one, you definitely feel that it's like a smaller scope, smaller, like a lot of rural towns. Definitely the impression
you
that
can't
like
go into houses, which sucks.
Yeah, it's all kind of just there. I think like the PS2 comparison is very apt. Nadia, I've been thinking a lot about this because obviously Astrobot just came out. That feels like a very PS2 era game. Space Marine feels like a very PS2 era game. It feels like we are returning to the goodness. And so Visions of Mana kind of harkens to that, but I think I'm a little bit more middling overall in my reception of it, just because I think there's a lot of issues, whether it comes to clunkiness in the combat, like specifically with using items and things like that. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's very Mana.
I messaged a friend who was playing this because I was like, hey, do you have a thing where you try to use an item and your character just decides they don't want to use that item? And they're like, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, that's so Mana.
And FF7 Rebirth a lot too, where I'll go, hey, use this spell, and then there's this long delay, and they're like, no, I'm gonna attack instead, or they get interrupted or something.
It's even worse in Mana.
Yeah, and to the thing you said about the vessels, I think my biggest complaint about the combat and the classes are that you get a lot of vessels, you get a lot of alternate options for these characters to use, but you don't get a lot of elemental points if you're not like really, really grinding and hunting for them. And so you really, and like it starts out, you can get those first couple rows of skills, of abilities that are kind of transferable pretty easily. But then when you get into the higher stuff and you specialize into that stuff, now you're paying like a lot of elemental points all at once. And so I ended up just kind of specializing characters into one vessel and leaving them there because they also, look, I love a good transformation sequence, by the power of the moon, and stuff like that. Yeah. Like I love that stuff.
I think they look great.
They look great sequences. But you have to do it every time you get a vessel for a character. So every time I got a vessel, it was like, okay, go down the row. Okay, Morley's turning into his fire version. Val is turning into his fire version.
It's only the first time, right?
Yeah, but you have to do it when you have 5 characters by the end of this game and you get a vessel and you're like, time to watch this animation 5 times. I get really tired. And also you have to
skippable?
It is skippable, but like there's something about having to literally just open it up and just go down the row one by one and then being like, okay, what do they actually do? Like who should be holding this? How do I want to arrange this? I think like the menuing is a problem in this game.
It
is pretty. There's a lot to it. I think it is
a little complex, needlessly so.
It almost feels like they took a look at the battle system and we really need to keep adding on to this so that people don't ding us for being overly simple. So they just keeping systems upon systems, and the menus struggle to support it a little bit.
Yeah, and I ultimately, like, I don't know, outside of what weapon you're using and maybe what kind of elements you're applying, I don't know how meaningful those differences really feel at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because, like, so Morley, I think, because I've been playing mostly as Morley. Morley is my favorite character in the game. He's the best. I love him. His story, when you meet him for the first time, so good. I loved it. That was honestly like a high point of the game for me. he's kind of got the katana when you start with him, and he's very Virgil. He does that little like, slide the katana out really fast, and then does the spin slash across.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, there we go. And then you can give him the one where he's got 2 daggers, like one in each hand and then one in his tail.
His tail, yeah, he's a great thief.
He can do that great, like zipping across the air. So you'd air combo them up and then do like a little across in the air and then dunk them back down. And I was like, cool, Morley feels rad. And I kept playing as him, and I was like, I don't really feel like there's a reason for me to not use him in this specific configuration, or even like when I change him to other ones, it doesn't feel like he's meaningfully doing something different. It feels like it's just kind of a different flavor of what Morley does. There are like healer classes, there are some like mage classes, but I feel like there could have been maybe a bit more of a distinction in terms of like individual character identity. And the differences in what they do, because while Morley can, be a little bit more of, an assassin type fighter or a thief, like you said, Nadia, he is going to largely fill one role. Same with Palomena is going to be like your magic user.
The magic user,
The 5th character that you'll get down the line is kind of your healer. I don't know why they give you a healer so late. It feels very strange.
That's something Mana does. It's so strange.
I think that's my other thing, is just that this game is like really close to just wowing me and being like, oh, this is like really doing something, or like it does a dark twist. I'm like, oh, this is really great. I really like this. And then it immediately does something where I'm just like, I don't know. That's Val is the dumbest human being on the face of the earth, and like it's a constant pivot between these two things. I told the story last time of like whenever you pick up those grizzly drops, Val just goes grizzly, and he's so excited. But I was having this conversation where people were talking about like how much like sorrow had happened on their journey and how difficult it was, and they were like, how do we talk to Val? It seems like he's having trouble dealing with it. I don't know, we'll just kind of, when he feels ready to open up, we'll talk to him. And then Val runs over a drop and he's like, grizzly, and I'm like, what the work through it, bud.
The Mana series is interesting because it is definitely one of the core action RPG franchises that goes back to a long way in RPG history. When I think of Secret of Mana, and when it first came out, I'm gonna say Mana. When I think of Secret of Mana, when it first came out, it was gorgeous. It was one of the best looking Super Nintendo games. And in the years since, maybe Secret of Mana has struggled to keep up that standard. It has kind of fallen into more of a B tier RPG series, and certainly has its fans. Nadia, I'm looking at you. I'm wondering, how does Vision of Mana compare to the rest of the series, Nadia?
Well, despite being a Mana fan, I had big chunks of the games that I just don't like or didn't play. I mean, played the
What's
first
your
one
least favorite Mana?
Probably Legend of Mana, the PlayStation one, just because it
really
was.
There are
it was
people
nothing.
who love it.
I know,
love it.
But I was like, wow, this is going to be like, even the from the first game to the third game. The third game added a lot of stuff I wasn't really a huge fan of, but it was still a great looking game, great sounding game. Mana's always had a problem kind of giving itself an identity. Like the first couple of games are pretty straightforward action adventure games where weapon switching is a big deal, and then by Legend of Mana they start adding more to it and more systems, and just. It always was best. It's kind of like Star Fox, really. It was always best as a straightforward action RPG, which it is in this case. And in the case of Visions of Mana, in which case I say it's a great Mana game. But Mana game is going to Mana game, so there's a lot of problems and flaws that I don't know why are. When I look at something and say, "Oh yeah, that's Mana, all right," like I can't cast a spell on time. It's kind of funny, but at the same time, everyone knows that the first Mana game, Secret of Mana, was kind of a mess of code that was, again, Nasir, I think, programmed that alongside the first Final Fantasy games, which were brilliant, but kind of a mess in terms of its code. And that's fine, but that was several thousand years ago. Why are the same weird mistakes happening?
Several thousand years ago?
Strange.
Before the dawn of time, there was Mana doing all of this annoying stuff.
And it still is. I don't understand. It's a fantastic Mana game, but that's the key word right there, Mana. I love it. but someone like Eric would be like, oh well, I understand why this game is
Hater.
special, but at the same time, like, yeah.
Yeah, I understand like why people like this game, and I even like want to like this game. I just think this entry has some weird hangups that I kind of wish had been smoothed over.
Yeah.
I think a few tunings that honestly like would have just made life a little bit easier in this game, would have really done a lot for it, whether it is kind of like the button prompts like you said, or just figuring out why like some of the item stuff doesn't feel like it's clicking just right. Like there's just a lot of fidelity issues I have with this game where it's like just tune it a little bit more and just like find that stuff, figure out why it's not clicking, then the action is going to flow a bit smoother, then the fights are going to get a bit smoother, then the traversal is going to feel a little bit more natural. And instead there's just kind of all these little, it's like you're driving down a road and there's like speed bumps on it, right? And you're trying to go 60, but you keep hitting speed bumps. And like, yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at right now, where like I'm revving up the engine, I'm so excited. I did this sick boss fight the other night where you were like on a ship and shooting cannons at this big monster and stuff like that, and I was like, this is sick, this is really cool. And then like the boss just kind of stopped for a minute because I think I cycled it too fast, and it was like, I don't know what to do, and I'm standing there on the cannon like, I don't know what you're supposed to do next either, and we're just kind of waiting, and then all of a sudden it's like, I guess I'll go into phase 3, and then like it's
I just picture the window sound like that little spinny.
yeah, the little Apple
his head.
loading wheel or whatever.
I'm surprised.
Modem sound.
I'm surprised this one isn't on Nintendo Switch. It looks like it'd probably have some frame rate issues. You'd have to work really hard to optimize it for the platform, but it really does kind of feel like the definition of a Switch game to me.
It would have to be optimized, which I know is like a strange thing to say, but it would at least have to go 30 frames per second. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I would ideally
it
like
would
60.
take
It makes me think of maybe the going from Dragon Quest 11 to Dragon Quest 11S, where they managed to retain the essence of the graphics, but they weren't quite as maybe detailed in terms of
that was like a really
textures and such.
Really intensive project they worked really hard on from the ground up. I can't see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe with a smaller project like Mana, some Square would say, okay, like we should put this on the Switch, but is it even worth putting in the money to optimize it and all of that? I'd say yes. Switch is like a perfect platform for this.
Nadia's like, I say yes.
it is. I think you're right. It's a good platform for it, but they
would feel
don't want
home,
to.
Yeah. I mean, Steam Deck was the thing. Everyone was talking about, like, well, is it playable on Steam Deck? Can it work on Steam Deck? I know that's kind of the question for most games, whether you're, like, super high fidelity or, like, little indie game. Like, everybody wants to know, does it run on Steam Deck?
But does it run on Steam Deck?
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't tested the Steam Deck on it yet. I've been playing on my fancy new gaming PC because I have a fancy new gaming PC, and I want to see how good it looks. It looks very good on fancy new gaming PC, but... I would imagine in this case that they just kind of went with what felt like it would work best. And then also you have to imagine, and this is totally assumption on my part, but like at this point, I think a lot of companies were going like, well, Switch 2 has got to be out by like soon, right? And
there's a good chance we'll stay on Switch 2, actually.
Maybe. I mean, after all this stuff, all the reports coming out about the studio, that feels like a 50-50. So
I was looking up Visions of Mana, and on the Steam Deck subreddit, somebody said, Visions of Mana, impressed with performance so far. And they said that they're playing an LCD Steam Deck with graphic settings on high, FSR2 on balance, and lock the frame rate to 40.
Oh.
Interestingly, if you drop the graphics to medium and enable FSR, even on quality, it doesn't look as good. But they said that they saw the FPS is largely stable with a few dips when entering a new map area. But all in all, they felt like it was fine.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty decent,
Yeah. And then it's probably much better if you're playing on a Steam Deck OLED, because there are notable performance improvements on the OLED. Seriously, if you buy a Steam Deck, just buy an OLED. Don't bother with an LCD.
But what if I put one Steam Deck on top of another Steam Deck? Can I get it like moving faster then? Do they work like that?
Yeah, you got to duct tape it first.
Take them together. That increases the power. So the question that I have with the Mana series, whatever, is what is the future for this series? So unfortunately, it came out as this game was releasing that Uka Studios, which was the developer, was basically being shuttered. It's winding down. NetEase is moving on. And like so many other video games, there's an increased sense that RPG development is a zero-sum game. Either you go really big and you put out a big budget game, or just don't bother. And so does the Mana series have a place in that ecosystem?
I mean, I think so. I kind of described why I like this game as a very simple action RPG, a very PlayStation 2 themed action RPG, which is always something we can use. We can always use smaller games. If, we don't get a new Mana game out of this, it's because, as you said, Kat, there's just no interest in projects that don't yield that return on investment right away, especially now that, holy crap, Wukong made $1 million zillion. We all got to be the next Wukong, and everyone's just kind of up in arms about that. But I don't know. It depends what happens to Uka. I'm really disappointed that they're gone because, the things Eric and I have been talking about here, they're very fixable. It's the kind of thing you do in a sequel. You just kind of refine things unless they want to keep that Mana essence for some reason. I don't freaking know. So it's very, very up in the air.
Essence? What is the essence of Mana?
Like I was saying earlier, just those weird quirks that somehow transferred from Seiken Densetsu 2. Like, why? I don't understand why that would happen. But with some fine-tuning, as Eric said, it could be a series that goes to WoW. I don't think it'll ever be like a AAA series, and it doesn't have to be. So when a game like this fails to continue, it's purely the fault of like the publishers who close things down before it can get a chance to do so. Like, I'm not saying there will never be another Mana game. There's a good chance there will be, but what are you going to do? Start over again from another studio and have them kind of make the same rookie mistakes and they get shut down because they didn't make $1 zillion? It's really disappointing. It's a disappointing time of year, or disappointing time of life, really.
So I find something interesting in that we're seeing maybe, and this is very early, very speculative, but I feel like we might be seeing already a shift in looking at scope of games and studios responding to the ever expanding scope creep of, make the biggest, make the best. Not everybody can make GTA 6, right? Like it's not possible. It's not even really financially feasible in some ways. I already think we're starting to see studios respond to that, whether it's, I feel like Square Enix kind of has your pillar games, like your major big releases, and then smaller, like B-tier releases. I feel like Mana and Saga and stuff like that slot in really well there. Atlas, they might put out Metaphor, but they're also going to have, like, here's SMT 5 Redux. Like here's a new version of this game, which they always kind of do. But we're also seeing companies kind of go back and kind of use a remake or a remaster to be a springboard for a new project because of the way that building something in that engine can then kind of save some extra resources spent down the line. I think Trials of Mana into Visions of Mana is very interesting. I was thinking of this because Nintendo just had, we remade those 2 Famicom Detective Club games, and we'll let that team just make a new Famicom Detective Club game because why not? And now that game is apparently like one of the best, like, quiet sleepers of the year that everybody is who's played it is like so amped up about. And so I am curious to watch, like, especially when you have these smaller games, like these mid-range. They're not trying to be these big tentpole games. They're just kind of trying to be these things that fill out a portfolio, that fill out what a publisher is putting out there. I think Mana, like, slots super well into that. I don't think it needs to be Final Fantasy 16. I don't think it needs to be Forspoken, even, like big, loud new IP that's going to put something on the map, or the next continuation of this great series. Like, Mana is what Mana is. And to what Kat said earlier, I think when you look at Mana, what the essence of Mana is, it's a look, it's a feel, it's a certain coziness and comfort. I think of these games as comfort food RPGs. So even though I have qualms with it, I don't think it's like the greatest RPG launch of the year. I do think it did what it needed to do for the people it needed to do it for, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, I don't really see this as a complete stumbling failure. I just see it as like they made a game for the people who want this kind of game. And honestly, I kind of dig that, even when it doesn't always like ring the bell for me. So
Virus asked, "What is the secret of mana?"
We
I think
never
that is a
find out.
question.
I don't. I think I even looked that up once, and it's just what we were localized into, and I don't know why, but I think it's interesting that Japan liked it enough to kind of adapt that over Seiken Densetsu.
Yeah, I think that the Mana series, maybe the best path forward is to go in a more nostalgia direction. Go with 2D pixel art. I bet it could work really well if you went for kind of a Sea of Stars look, but with an action RPG kind of design. Certainly with Legend of Mana and Secret of Mana, it was once known for its outstanding pixel art. And I think the cel shaded graphics are really nice, but don't stand out quite as much. I think the monster designs are really strong in the Mana series, especially Rabbites, for
Rabbits
example.
are great. They've been around forever.
yeah,
The slimes are the same. There's a real whimsical feel to the Mana series that I find very appealing. And as a series, its heyday for me was very much the 16-bit era. So I would lean into that a little bit more and try to combine all of the best bits of the Mana series into one game if I were going to try and make another one, rather than just maybe the Visions of Mana direction isn't quite the direction the series needs to go. But on the flip side, it's easy for a series to get trapped in a whirlwind of a whirlpool of nostalgia and just play the hits. So
let me pose this to you. Maybe even like a Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom style look. Like not necessarily a complete pivot to an older style, but something that does sort of rekindle that nostalgia, because I do think it's possible. And I even looked this up while I was writing about Visions of Mana, because I was like, there's got to be some elaborate German word for this, and there was. I can't remember what it was, but it was like nostalgia for something that you never personally experienced, like a feeling of nostalgia that you get even though you never had nostalgia for that thing. And that is maybe the essence of Mana in a way, is like it does feel like it's harkening back to something like, you know, that you would have grown up watching, that you would have grown up playing. But then it has those dark twists and turns that do feel like really impactful. Kind of the way that a lot of our favorite media growing up, you know, a lot of the kid shows that secretly they suddenly turn dark all of a sudden. Those are the ones that end up sticking with you for a long time. And so I do think that's like the heart of Mana. And maybe you find those aesthetics that can just help kindle that fire even more.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that Mana was one of the few SNES RPGs that did make it over to Europe. So that side of the world is quite fond of it as well, as I recall.
a lot of history to this series, and it would be a real pity to see it fall by the wayside.
It would, yeah. You're right, it's very historical. It has a lot of good talent behind it. It has a lot of, we said, like, the monster designs go as far back as the Game Boy. I don't want to see this series, you know, fall into obscurity. It's just not... It'd be destroying part of game history, and that's a shame.
Another thing that I think makes Secret of Mana stand out was it was a multiplayer co-op RPG.
I do wish this was multiplayer. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not enough co-op games out there.
Yeah, there isn't.
And especially co-op RPGs. And I'm thinking of an RPG, I can never remember its name, but it's the one where you can play as a family together. And it's sort of a top-down game, and everybody has their own different specialties.
Mother 3?
I think... No, it's not. It's always Mother 3 with you. Somebody's yelling it right now. The Sims. Yes, thank you, Shareable Texas.
No, in The Sims, you drown your characters. You take away the ladder.
Yeah. I don't think there are enough of those types of games, and that's a real niche that I think that the Mana series can fill.
Yeah.
Rather than playing as a sort of another single-player zone-based RPG where that's with a hack and slash kind of mechanics and cel-shaded graphics, go for more co-op.
Yeah.
Play with friends. I think that might be the path forward for this series if they manage to make a sixth
Especially
mainline
if
game.
like say you do put it on, you do make it accessible with the Switch or whatever comes next for portable hybrids, and everyone has their own screen, like, that would be a lot of fun.
You play as 4 alms traveling to the mana tree, and at the end, it tells you that one of you may walk free, and the other 3 will become sacrifices, and you have to suddenly fight each other at the end.
Oh, awesome.
The greatest of all co-op twists. Oh,
Very Double Dragon.
Square Enix. My email's in my
Double
bio.
Dragon, isn't it?
Yeah. Billy,
All right.
no.
Final thoughts. Would you recommend this game, Nadia?
I would. If you're looking for light action RPG fare, if you're a Mana fan, absolutely, I would say go for it right away. But if you are in the market for something that moves quickly, something that's just like, a 7 out of 10 or 7.5, 10 RPG that has a beautiful world that does have its quirks and does have its problems, but it feels old in a good way. And I would recommend it. Absolutely.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm like squarely in that same camp where, like, putting a number on it, it is like a 7 out of 10 RPG. It is a very, like, has its flaws, but then also has its moments. And I think, like, it would be a little bit easier to recommend if, like we said, it was on the Switch or something, because it feels very casual, very, like, pop in, pop out. But
yeah,
I think if you want just something that is a fantasy adventure, lighthearted, breezy, it's not going to, like, suck away your time. I've barely engaged with the side quests in this game because I did a couple of them and then found out, like, oh, they're all kind of just go do thing and come back for a little bit of a reward. And I was like, okay, they're not giving me anything that's, like, crazy or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's very just, like, get on the path, play your RPG, have a good time, be done with it. Maybe return to it a couple years down the road. Like, I think it's good for that. So even though it's a game that has its faults, I do also think it's a game that if any of that sounds appealing to you, you might have a good time with it. So
Justice wants to know, if I'm looking for an action RPG, Tales of Arise or Visions of Mana?
Tales of Arise.
Tales of Arise. I think.
Yeah.
You can't float that to me.
Yeah.
Tales of Arise
has
higher
pacing
budget.
problems. Yeah. Well,
Tales of Arise
that game looks gorgeous. Yeah.
It's definitely a meatier RPG than Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is a lot more light fare, like tea time.
If you like lands, want something a bit meatier, you can.
Froth appears out of nowhere. Did somebody say meteor?
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, Arise is an interesting comparison because I think it has a lot of similar combat mechanics and ideas of, like, swapping characters and doing combos, but Arise just feels smoother. It, like, got those tag mechanics in a way that you only really expect to see in, like, a tag fighter, like a fighting game. That combat system still feels so smooth and excellent to this day.
It's a great combat system.
But, like, yeah, I also think, for all that being said, there is something to the simplicity relative in Trials of Mana. Like, you're not doing these giant Tails combos where you just feel like you're playing Marvel versus Capcom. Like, you're kind of just doing your little, like, ba 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 ha ha, and now you, like, do your combo again. Like that's it. Yeah, you're not, like, just dumping these, like, massive, it's Marvel, baby, like
It's Marvel, baby.
Demon
All right,
Fang.
that's our review of Visions of Mana. What do you think? Are you a big fan of it? Is it your favorite RPG of the year, or are you just not really feeling it? And what is the future of the Mana series? We want to hear your thoughts. Send me a DM or email me at cat@bloodgodpod.com, or hey, come on the Discord, talk about it, our weekly episodes thread. Okay, it's time now for a series of random encounters. Concord, the live service shooter by Sony, abruptly shuttered in a blow to Sony's live service ambitions. This one won't be terribly relevant to RPG fans, except that there are plenty of RPGs that also aspire to be live service games. So I think this one is being closely watched to show what this could mean for service games going forward. Xbox reiterates that Black Myth Wukong being delayed on the platform is not due to the platform's limitations. PlayStation's 30th anniversary image appears to accidentally include the PS5 Pro design, LOL, with an announcement expected to be happening as soon as this week, though it could be closer to Tokyo Game Show. Either way, we're going to see it very soon. Harebrained Schemes, the studio behind BattleTech and Shadowrun, are making a sci-fi horror RPG called Graft. And if you go check out our Pantheon of the Blood God, you can go find our deep dive retrospective into Shadowrun Dragonfall that we did a couple years ago. Cyberpunk 2077 fans raised $2 million and funds a board game in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Phil Spencer says he's made some of the worst game choice decisions after passing on Destiny and Guitar Hero. Phil, what are you doing, Phil? Phil.
He's just presenting himself to be beaten up these days. Everyone can throw pretzels at him.
And finally, Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 7 is here, bringing it with evil endings. Karlach. Go check out that evil ending because it's pretty metal if you play with her as an origin character. 1 million mods have been installed in less than 24 hours because the new patch has mod support. And get this, they're not done yet. Larian doesn't want to make an expansion, but honestly, by this point, they've done kind of an expansion's worth of content, even though they haven't really put in new quests and everything. But they have added a lot of new features. It's quite impressive. So who knows? Maybe they'll do a Stardew Valley, and we'll get the equivalent of a 1.6 update, where all of a sudden you have an entirely new area to go and explore, which would be pretty rad.
Or like farming. That'd be pretty cool.
Finally, bring back
goddamn turnips.
Bring back the rest of Baldur's Gate in Act 3. I want to explore the rest of the city. There's a ton of content that they can reinstate in Baldur's Gate 3. Actually, on the Stardew Valley tip, we got an update recently from Concerned Ape that they're still working on 1.6 for console. Hurry up already. I'm waiting for it on Switch. But apparently he's been so busy with the patch that he hasn't actually been able to work on Haunted Chocolatier in quite a while. So we're never going to get that game.
Probably not, but that's okay.
Well, it's not okay to me, but I mean...
Well, he can do whatever he wants. He's just this one-man farming machine.
I guess. Well, I mean, he has a team, but it's a small team. Apparently they play a lot of Fortnite, and they have
that for them. Mm-hmm.
They have a whole meme where they're like, what if Pam were in Fortnite? They were imagining Stardew Valley collab with Fortnite, and they're like, you should just play as Pam. Everybody play as Pam.
I'm drunk for this shit. Where's my cigarettes?
Why is everybody Waluigi?
Everyone keeps regressing to Waluigi.
It's like how evolution always chooses to make things in crab shape. De-evolution, we always evolve into Waluigis.
Now we're rolling into the tavern, talking about what we've been playing, sitting by the fire. Eric, what the heck? You've been playing an Atelier game?
No, it's not an Atelier game. No, don't fake out the listeners like that. So I was traveling. I
saw the word Atelier and a little light bulb went off in my brain.
Well, let me tell you, Kat, I'm about to give you a new problem, which is something that you're going to need to read. I was traveling this week, and so I didn't have a lot of time to play video games, but I did have a lot of time to read manga. So next year, there's an anime coming out for a manga series called Hat Atelier. And I've talked before about some of the other series that kind of constitute this large fantasy push that's happening in manga right now. Delicious in Dungeon was huge, obviously. Free Ren. I actually have right now, my friends got me a desk mat for Free Ren, which I'm very excited about. It looks great. Nice. I started reading Hat Atelier, and let me pitch it to you this way. What if Harry Potter was good? What if?
I'm listening.
What if the entire manga is about like magic, like witches can do magic in this fantasy world, and the main character wants to become a witch, wants to learn the craft, and as you soon learn that magic is done not by like casting spells or whatever, but it's by drawing glyphs. You basically use special ink to draw glyphs, and they have to like conceal that fact from the populace, because if the populace knew, then there would be like a regression to the wars of old that caused like terrible things to scar the earth and all that, people using magic to harm each other and stuff like that. And so she kind of, I'm not going to get too deep into some of the stuff because the tragic origin story is very tragic. It's very good. I'm not going to get into that, but eventually she starts learning under the care of a very Gojo-like mentor, who's like, what if Dumbledore was a hot anime boy? And starts getting into it, learning about all these rules about magic. And the thing I always disliked, especially as I got older, about Harry Potter was that the
Harry Potter.
Yeah, so like Harry Potter is a series where Harry ends up maintaining the status quo, and the Death Eaters are just like comically evil, right? They're like, but we want to do the murder spell, and you're like, well, you probably shouldn't do the murder spell, so I'm going to uphold the wizard police state instead. But this manga actually gets into the idea of like, why would you want to control what kind of spells can be used? Because they specifically say like, okay, you can't use spells that harm other people, that can like change their bodies, right? But that also includes healing. That also includes the ability to like repair someone's broken limb or something like that. And so like the characters start to raise valid questions about like, why are we not allowed to use that magic? Why is that wrong? And so the kind of antagonizing force in this manga, the Brim Hats, want to bring back all magic, all forbidden magic, because they're like, you have lost what humans can do with that. And so when they're talking about doing stuff like, oh, I want to do the murder spells, you're like, oh, come on, that's bad. But then they're like, but don't you want to like be able to heal people too? Don't you want to be able to like cure people of disease and sickness with your magic? And you're like, yeah, kinda. And it becomes a very interesting like dichotomy between like you have magic that is intended for good but cannot do good in all situations, and magic that can do the good that you would like to do but then is unbound and could also cause great harm. And the main character finds herself kind of caught up in the middle of this conflict between these two factions. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I think it's one of like the best drawn manga I've ever seen. It's absolutely gorgeous. I cannot wait for the adaptation. I think it's being done by the same studio that did Zom 100, so it should look absolutely fantastic. But I really do think in this like revitalization that we've had of fantasy, you know, like the two biggest RPGs we have coming out this year, for the rest of the year, I would say are two major fantasy RPGs, Metaphor and Dragon Age, and alongside it, anime and manga are having this surgence of fantasy writing too, and it's really exciting to see. So Witch Hat Atelier, like, put it on your radar, y'all. Like, if you're looking for manga to read, especially, I love talking to folks who are like, oh, I want to read manga, but, you know, like, I don't really want to read One Piece or stuff like that. Like, try Witch Hat Atelier. Like, it's not what you think it's going to be. It's going to be, like, a beautiful read that will surprise you in all the ways that can do things that you might not have thought is common material for a manga.
Can I say something about Harry Potter?
Oh, okay. We're all talking about Harry Potter now?
You're a wizard. You're a wizard, Harry. There's plenty to criticize about Harry Potter's world building, not the least being that J.K. Rowling was completely out of her depth when it came to writing about literally anywhere outside England. Like once she started trying to write about America or Japan, it got real cringy real fast. But I think that, at least in terms of the main villain, the Death Eaters, this was written in, what, the 2000s?
Early 2000s.
And it actually kind of turned out to be prescient in having the main villains being white supremacist, extremely racist, basically the magical KKK, right?
Yeah.
And we were like, wow, that's a little over the top. And then it turned out to be like, oh, well, then 2016 happened, and we all saw what happened there. So
Harry Potter ends up being a very frustrating mirror of politics in a way where, like, not to get too deep in this, shout outs to the comments, but like, yeah, you definitely have like an extremist side on one side, and you're like, oh, well, they want to do the murder, and they want, like, you know, this weird thing about like a racially pure wizard, society and all that. And you're like, that's weird. That's bad. And then the fallback you have is the Ministry of Magic, which has a whole lot of problems that they just never really think too hard about.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, don't think too hard about the way we treat magical creatures and stuff like that.
It's very grounded in British classism, which I'm not British, but I think that maybe Americans don't quite grasp just how stratified British society can really be in some respects. And I think Harry Potter in particular is a comment on that. There's an entire sequence where they're looking at a giant family tree, which involves a lot of the various dark wizards basically intermarrying.
Yeah, a lot of cousins marrying each other.
A lot of incest. A lot of incest on the dark wizard side of things. And in that respect, it touches on especially its portrayal of the media is very British.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's what I mean when I say that when she got outside of England and tried to start commenting on, say, America, it got really bad in a hurry.
So then maybe the thing about Hat Atelier is just that, like, I think it's commentary on magic and how, like, forbidden magic specifically, because I always found in Harry Potter, like, what are the forbidden spells? Well, it's the torture spell, the killing spell, and I forgot what the third one was. What was the third? It's the mind control spell. The three things that are pretty unethical to do, but then everything else.
But you can take the potion that'll turn you into somebody else, which is an incredible violation of privacy.
You can take the deepfake potion, but you're not allowed to do the killing.
The AI potion uses 6 fingers.
But like, I do think that that's like a more interesting commentary, because it becomes about like what is the power of magic and the allure of magic. You get some really great segments in the arc that I just finished where they talk about like how best intentions of unbound magic can turn into like greed, power, the idea that you might go too far in trying to do the thing that you believe is good. And I find it to be a more nuanced take about like the morality of magic than what Harry Potter ever attempted to get at.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think the magic in Harry Potter is weirdly an afterthought, or it's like a plot device. And she doesn't seem to spend a lot of time thinking about how it actually works in that series.
Yeah.
I read a couple years ago, I read Jonathan Strange, and that's a great example of integrating magic into the setting. And it's a very, very dense book with a lot of footnotes. It's almost this scholarly fantasy work, closer to maybe Lord of the Rings than it is to Harry Potter. But I really, it managed to capture the mystery and the wild feeling of magic in that setting, where it was not a tool for humans, but maybe something kind of beyond our understanding. Also has a really cool representation of fairies and history. Great book.
I love the
strongly
fae.
recommend.
But it's been a lot of manga and anime on my side. I started rewatching Big O just because I felt like it. Let me tell y'all, Big O holds up. That show holds up. I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, big Batman the Animated Series, Bruce Timm kind of energy with Big O.
Well, there's like cross pollination.
Aren't they the same? Aren't they the same studio?
It's Sunrise, I think, and I think they also assisted on the animated series at some point. There's like cross pollination between Big O and Batman the Animated Series, and you can tell when you're watching it. You're like, yeah, this is like similar vibes, but the whole idea of like, oh, we're all in this smoky noir city. Everyone lost their memories 40 years ago. There's androids who think they're people, very Blade Runner. But then giant robot shows up. He's like, it's showtime, and like the jazzy music starts playing. I'm just
and
like,
you have to have that very anime casty in the name of, like, you're not guilty, cast in the name of God or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like the Guilty Gear like round start thing, heaven or hell fight, and Steve Bloom just killing it in the dub. That's another series where I think you gotta watch the dub. Yeah.
had an anime recommended to me recently that I might check out. I think
Hit
it's
me with
called
it.
like Free Ren.
Yes,
Free Ren
Free
Beyond
Ren.
Journey's End.
It's so good, Kat. You will love
Yeah.
it. It's so good.
An elven mage embarks on a journey to reach the resting place of souls in order to reunite. ...
I'm gonna pitch it to you this way. All right, opening
Yeah.
episode. It's the end of the RPG journey. All right, so the
Cool.
venturing party is coming back home after defeating the Demon King. They have saved the realm. There's the warrior, like a dwarven berserker type guy. There's like a priest. There's the hero warrior, very Dragon Questy, and then there's Freeren, who's their mage. And while all of them are a dwarf and two humans, she's an elf, and elves are immortal. Elves are essentially like timeless, ageless, and so you kind of start to watch the years go by after they break up, and they age, and she doesn't, and she starts to realize that, hey, the people I love in my life are like fading away in front of me, and has to start to like deal with those emotions of like she will outlast everything that she cares about. And so previously she had not really cared about that stuff because she's a timeless elf, but now she cares because these people, her adventuring party, are fading into time. And so it starts to deal with that. I won't go too deep into it, but like, oh, it's a real, if you like the idea of what if an RPG journey got really sad, but also like beautiful, like melancholic and like Ghibli visuals at times, like it is gorgeous. It is frankly amazing.
I like Criminal Justice's take. Kat, it's what if Deedlit was sad about living forever?
Yes. Yes. Justice perfectly put.
I do like stories that take place after the big adventure where the party has all split apart and maybe everybody's moved on with their lives, but inevitably there's the one person who's still in the mix, still trying to fight the good fight. Everybody's like, "What? I'm trying to raise a family, or I've got a career now, or I'm getting old. I'm literally an elf, and I'm gonna live forever, and everybody else is old."
I actually find it interesting that Tolkien himself kind of addressed that, the idea of elves being immortal and outliving everyone, and that's why they go, where is it, west or east? I can't remember, some direction. They sail across the sea, and that's how they quote unquote die, because they do get exhausted having, people that they love die. It was kind of sad that Legolas and what's his name, Gimli? Like, they were friends for as long as they could be. Mm-hmm. And
to Valinor. I think
he sailed west. Yeah, along with Legolas.
The Undying Lands.
The Undying Lands. So I always find that very interesting because, Tolkien, even though I'm not a huge fan of reading The Lord of the Rings, I find his themes about like healing after a war extremely interesting, because he was there in the First World War, which really put a huge scar on most of humanity's psyche. So I don't know, I just find that very interesting that anime and stuff, they do ask these questions, and that's fantastic, but there have been answers that, were addressed from the very start by the man who made this standard that we all follow now, technically.
In the Lord of the Rings movies, on the other hand, we have the entire monologue about Arwen's gonna live forever while Aragorn ages and dies, and she's very sad until she realizes that she has kids, and then it's okay. So as long as she has kids, it's fine. Yeah, she's like, oh, I get to look after the kids. Terrific.
Well, I thought she was just happy to have company. Like, if you're immortal and your mate's gonna die long before you, I'd be happy to have, like, the kid's probably not gonna last as long as I am still, because
it's a statement on how kids are their own form of immortality or something to that effect.
Yeah, some people believe that.
So, Kat, the reason why I keep stressing this fantasy renaissance to you in manga is not just because it's really cool to watch happen, but also, like, it is 3 major fantasy manga that are all being written by women that are all, like, inspired by Lodoss War, by wizardry, by, like, all these classic RPGs and influences. And so I'm just saying it is extremely cat-coded, and that's why I keep pushing you on this.
Cat-coded. Well, all I can say is that I just want to watch Slayers now. Give me a remake of Slayers. We got a remake of Rama 1/2 coming out this fall. Cannot wait. Getting a remake of Magic Knight Rayearth this fall. Cannot wait.
Cannot wait for that.
Slayers. It's next.
I agree.
Megumi Hayashibara.
Lena Inverse must return.
Lena Inverse, my hero. Nadia, what have you been playing and or watching?
Actually, I've decided, okay, I got to finish something that I've started. So I went back to
finish something. God.
I went back to SteamWorld Heist, and just a fantastic game. I've actually been kind of slow on that one because I've been doing all the missions and getting like the perfect star score, so you can get the permanent upgrade for each region. But I think I am getting down to the end of the game, or the last half anyway. It's just you have to have patience for it. I found that if you rush into it the way you rush into the first game, you're not going to have fun. The fun is discovering what combinations work best with each mission. And once you get the grasp of that, it's a really fantastic game. Like, as good, if not better than the first one. Definitely one of my games of the year so far. Also, Peglin. Peglin is destroying my life.
Yeah, you really like Peglin.
Yeah, I want to hear
so
about
cute.
Peglin.
Peggle roguelite.
Basically, it's Peggle, but Slay the Spire. Exact same system where you're like kind of going down that branch map, getting certain squares that might be traps, might be a helpful item, getting relics, beating bosses, doing that loop and succeeding in that loop, and making these. If you try to go randomly and pick up any power up willy nilly, you're not going to succeed. But if you kind of focus on making a build, like for example, my favorite build is any kind of build where you can put extra bombs on the board, which attacks all the enemies before they can swarm you. So, or you can get like a kind of a build that focuses on building the attacks of the regular pegs, or balls that are only good when they hit like the criticals. So there's a lot of builds you can do, and I'm just having a good time like running through each one, because it's like Slay the Spire. Oh, I have half an hour, I'll just do a run. Oh, I screwed it up. Oh well, I had fun. I learned something.
Those are the best kind of runs.
Yeah.
For me, I am still working on my current projects, which is Final Fantasy XIV, Persona 3 Reload, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Persona 3 Reload, this week in GeckoCon, we're going back to school finally.
Yay.
And I've managed to get my courage up high enough that I think I can approach Yukari, which is very exciting to me. It's either Fuka or Yukari. Whichever one of them I can approach, I'm going to start getting to know in a hurry. I'm trying to raise my academics up high enough that I can talk to Mitsuru as well. I've got Koromaru in my party now.
Yay.
Very excited to have a little pup. I'm like, yeah, pup. Also that Scrappy Doo kid, he's in my party too. The boy genius. He's not extremely annoying, but he's like, can I be in your party? I'm like, no. Go away.
Be a child somewhere else.
P3 has like some of the best characters in that series, and also some of the ones that I like detest the most. Really speaking to the volume of it.
I have been thinking a lot about which cast is my favorite out of all of the Persona games. I think it's still Persona 4.
Wow.
But I have to think about it, honestly. I think it's just because I think it's just because I love the Yukiko Chie pairing. That is just the emotional core of that cast. I really like them, and unfortunately, I don't remember basically anyone else in that cast. But it really captured the school days feel.
Kanji's my favorite character.
Kanji, yeah. Well, that's a problematic character, but I liked him. Gosh darn it. After I finish Persona 3 Reload, I am gonna do this week in Persona 5. This week in Tokyo for Persona 5 Royal. Finally get through all of that one. So that's even high. That's an even heavier lift than Persona 3 Reload, which
sure is.
An extra semester. Yeah.
I'll have with Persona 3 Reload. I will be playing. There will be some weeks where there's basically nothing, and I cruise through an entire week in the span of about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, just go and do my chores, whatever. And then there are weeks like this one where I'm spending ages in the Tartarus trying to get to the next level. I'm like floor 100 something at this point. And I'm also doing heavy story sequences, so I'm playing for several hours at a time. But making a lot of progress in this one. I'm enjoying it. So, the other thing that I'm playing is I'm stuck in an incredibly annoying bit in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
I know
Right
exactly
now.
where you are.
Yeah,
Boxes.
It involves Ketchi, and I'm gonna keep calling it Ketchi. You deal with
He's
it.
catchy. I don't
Score
understand
those
what happened there.
3-pointers. Sink
Hates
those
it.
buckets.
That was my.
Oh
by
my
far-
god!
It's
You
the
know, so you know
worst.
exactly where I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
it's-
sorry. When I'm the queen of video games, box puzzles are banned forever. That's
agree.
it.
I agree. No,
Never
that
again.
that was the only part of the game that really disappointed me because the Nibelheim Mansion in the original game is a really creepy place, and I don't want to sit there playing mini games with a Scottish cat that's not named properly.
Yeah, I mean, I like Ketchi, but playing alone as Ketchi is kind of annoying. And there are
Yeah.
these really annoying enemies that I had to fight. And
Yeah.
there's this one particular enemy that I keep getting them down to a sliver of life, and they go completely ham on me. And even if I separate the cat from the Moogle, it's still coming after me, and it's hard to keep my health high enough. I guess I need to put protect on myself or something.
Probably.
I
I
need
think
to
it was
rearrange
you do
my
have
materia.
to use. Yeah, you do have to use the resources established to you because it is a bit of a difficult area, as I recall.
You
Yeah.
really do. And so I just want to get through this section, but it's emblematic to me of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would be a fucking incredible game if they just, but it has so much padding, so much filler, and this is just a key example of it. You did not need this entire section. There are people who worked really, really, really hard on this section. You didn't have to.
Yeah.
You just didn't.
Worked
No,
really
it.
hard to make Ketchi sink buckets. Nothing
The,
but net with those boxes.
Voice actor for Hojo, though, I just met him on the bus on the way to not Long Island, Retro World Expo. Like, we're just kind of
So
riding.
funny. How random. Oh my
It
god.
was like, and he was so like humble. I just thought he was some dude going to the convention, and he saw my Final Fantasy whatever I was wearing. And we talked because we're like, oh, we're heading to the same place, aren't we? Because we're going to the hotel. And he's like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, I'm listing all this cool stuff I'm proud of. And he's like, oh, I'm a voice actor. Well, who do you voice? Name it, and I voiced it. Like going back to Perceptor from like the original Transformers, and I'm like. Because I told my husband about it, and he's like, oh my god, he met Perceptor. I'm like, I guess he is. I don't know. He's everything, apparently.
That's so funny. Wow. The people that
great.
you meet on a bus, right?
Nadia once again
Exactly.
proving that she is the protagonist of reality.
I know. It really is.
My dad's the same way. People just randomly approach him and start talking to him. He's like, yeah, it just happened. I don't get it.
No, we're friends with all of the FF7 voice actors at this point. We had Brianna White on the show during the charity stream. Very grateful to her for coming on the show. He's not in Final Fantasy VII, but we had Ben Starr on at one point as well. Super cool. So,
Our
voice
goal is-
actors.
I
Yeah,
was
our
going to say
goal
our
is-
goal is to have everybody, just all the voice casts on. That's the end goal.
Make them say silly things.
And make
know.
them play
Say
VG
poo-poo
Tinder.
Sephiroth, you're a poo-poo head. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm 44 years
that-
old.
I think there's a lot to love about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I actually really love the acting. I love the
Yeah, it's really good.
chemistry of the individual characters. It's just fun to look at. I'm not normally a big fan of non-interactive cutscenes, but these cutscenes are really enjoyable. I like the combat a lot. It's interesting. It has just enough RPG, but it's also twitchy enough. The boss battles always leave my heart racing. I'm always
Yeah,
really
I like
excited.
I like Chadley's challenges. Like those are fun to do. I think.
I find them so hard. Actually, I still haven't managed to beat one of the summons. I've managed to
can't
get pretty
difficult.
close. I've managed to get pretty close on Phoenix, but the rest are really
the
really
intel?
tough. Yeah. I managed to get intel for a couple of them, and that still wasn't enough to
Yeah.
be able to.
They're pretty tough.
Some of them
Knock
even
them out.
have like 14 mechanics, like in rage bars and stuff like that, which I found was really interesting. I think that's a case where bringing something over from 14 felt very natural and interesting. Having those, like, you have to beat this section and like clear the DPS check, or it's going to enrage and kill you, and that's really, I think, fun in FF7 Rebirth. But The weird thing now about having played these 7 remakes is while I play FF6, which tune in tomorrow for the next entry of that, it has me sitting there thinking, like, what would this scene look like if it was given the FF7 remake treatment? Because I do think there are some scenes that I would love to see in that style, like the floating continent and the statues and all that would be really incredible to see. Even the Celeste scene afterwards on the terrible island of sorrow and misery and no, it's now become a thing on our stream that we say no slow fish. But like,
how did you feel meeting the Roaring Triad, by the way, for the first time?
I don't think I've actually met the Triad.
No, the statues.
Well, the statues, yeah. But do they actually, do they become the Triad? Do I fight the Triad? You can tell me if I fight the Triad. Boy, the World of Ruin really is something, isn't it? I just finished the part where... I finished the part where you get the airship, like the new airship, and I was like, I can't believe they made me like toxic male influencer. Like, I hate this. I was ready to dislike him.
As a cinema.
Oh, yeah.
Where the Falcon is rising from the water.
Like literally where you're like walking down the stairs and it's doing like the flashback scenes in the background. Good. And I'm sitting there like, they were just cooking. Like somebody had to sit there and look at what the Super Nintendo can do and be like, yeah, we can make this happen. We can make this work. Like the vision, the direction there is like fascinating.
And the acoustic rendition of Setser's theme, you only hear that one time in the game. So good.
I think this is largely why I keep harping on the like sameness of a lot of modern games to like give us the like the Sony over the shoulder angle. And like I think God of War 2018 is the one I will give an exception to because of the way they use the one shot. But like I think a lot of games kind of try to do very similar looks and ideas and kind of use what has been popular in other games. But I look at something like FF6 and I'm like, this doesn't look like other Super Nintendo games. Like the way they lay things out, the way they do scenes like that,
color
where it's like
palette.
We're going to swap perspectives. We're going to change the way this looks. We're even going to have like flashback scenes in here that kind of like just change perspective in interesting ways. Like, I don't know. It's a generation that had limitations, but thought about how they can make the most of those limitations and toy with them. And I find that super interesting.
16-bit era was definitely a time where developers were really taking swings and they were really straining against the limitations of their platform and were desperate to create movie-like experiences. And that's nowhere more apparent than in Super Nintendo era Square soft games. And then the PlayStation 1 came out, and all of a sudden they started to become unbound as they had the ability to make these huge cutscenes, and that continued into the PS2, and it became a trap because you get unlimited resources, and you start to lose sight of what made these games so special in the first place. And I have a lot of love for PS1 era Final Fantasy games, don't get me wrong, but you can already see the making of what would kind of prove to be the series is not undoing, but maybe it would go down a level from the earlier games.
I think it depends on how you're looking at it, because if you're looking at the PS1, you're still seeing Square working against limitations. I mean, you can absolutely see why they told Nintendo to go take a hike, but when I look at the way they rendered certain scenes, like, and even created like 3 models of Cloud so that they could kind of present them in the right context in each one, I don't know, I see they were still working against a lot of limitations. And you're absolutely right, though. The 16-bit era, like, they just wanted to break free so badly, and that's why they went to the PlayStation in the first place. But yeah, every developer is working against limitations in a way, I suppose. But bloat is definitely a real problem in modern games.
So on the flip side, I think the thing that I really like about the PS1 era Final Fantasies, and this is the case with Final Fantasy VI's World of Ruin as well, is I love all the Easter eggs. I love all of the side quests that you can do. There's so much to find and do within the world. I love all of the mini games. And this continued all the way, arguably, through Final Fantasy X and started to fall off a bit in 12. And then by the time you got to 13, that aspect of it just kind of went away entirely. And it's sort of yet to recover it. And I think Rebirth tries to do all of that again. And honestly, there's a lot to do and find in this game, and I really appreciate that. It's just too much filler, too many filler, too much playing basketball. I love, by the way, that I mentioned this kind of obliquely, and you instantaneously knew which section I was talking about.
That was one section I hated.
Yeah, everyone hates that section.
Rocket League with Red 13 yet, though?
Have I played? I think I have. Yeah,
there's a Rocket League Red 13 game, which is great.
I like that one. I think that one's pretty fun. Yeah. But I find it super interesting, even just looking at like when you go to PS1, you have the camera angles suddenly shift, and also the idea of these like pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D models on top, and that created a new look, a new way of framing this stuff that did not feel super doable on the Super Nintendo at large. And now you have something like Fantasian coming out, and there were a bunch of previews that came out recently of Fantasian that got me really excited for that game, because the diorama look in that game is so nice, interesting and so different, and so fresh in a way. And so like I do think there are people out there like pushing the envelope, even when it comes to like third person perspective and kind of what we've come to expect with that stuff. But there's something about FF6 that like I'm not going to say it's timeless or whatever. Like you can definitely tell it's old. Like you can tell that it's aged, but like it still gets so much across in those moments that does like resonate. I'm not sitting there going like, oh, I bet this was really cool at the time or whatever, but kind of sucks now. But no, I'm getting really invested in these characters and their stories, and I can understand why people loved this stuff. I do think the World of Ruin like really helps with that too, though. Like the moment that you have the time skip. I love a time skip in an RPG. Yeah, that's the best.
Can't hurt to have a time skip. I love time skips.
Shout out to Dragon Age 2, the game of time skips.
Yeah.
The game, and Dragon Quest V, honestly.
Yeah, that was a great time skip.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, great game, needs an editor.
Yes.
And that's it for the tavern. Nadia, take us home.
So I mentioned last time I was at ODCon recently, just hanging out with friends. And so we were at some restaurant, and a song came over the radio. And my friends just start lifting their phones to the radio like Goku gathering energy for a spirit bomb. And it's like, oh, I guess you can do that. Like you have your phone listen to a few lyrics and it tells you what the song is, right?
Shazam.
You learn what Shazam is?
I mean, I knew it existed, but here's the thing.
Nadia's nostalgia pit. Did y'all know about Shazam?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I come from the era where in grade 6 we had a project where we had to pick a song and record the lyrics, like write them down and distribute them to everyone in the class. And the way you did that was you sat with your shitty ass, boombox, and you listened really hard, and you paused, and you wrote it down. Now, here's the thing. First of all, it's very hard to do. So when I see kids, like, lifting their phones, like, to God or whatever to hear the song, I'm like, you're spoiled, but I understand. So, first of all, you can't hear it too well. Second of all, you have a class with a lot of kids who English isn't their first language because they're new to Canada, so they're writing down the weirdest lyrics you've ever read in your life. And it made for a really interesting medley of strange songs where someone got the lyrics for Beat It, or maybe it was Billie Jean, completely wrong. But this was interesting to me because the way I got out of that project in the first place, because I didn't want to do it, was I said, I'm going to do Elton John. Because I like Elton John, like, a lot. I saw him live, it was incredible, but I didn't want to do this project. So that was the one time in my life that I got my mom to do my work for me, because she's a huge fan of Elton John. God damn it, Toothless. 1 second.
Oh.
This cat has been walking across my keyboard all day. Yes. Say hi, Toothless.
Oh.
Okay.
Cute.
So yeah, that was the only time I got my mom to do my project for me. But here's an interesting thing. One of my friends, sorry, it wasn't one of my friends, but someone in the class did, what's the song? Smooth Criminal, which of course is a fantastic song. Now, our teacher told us what that song was about. What do you think Smooth Criminal is about? Just out of curiosity, Kat. Eric.
I don't know.
It's asking Annie whether she's okay. Yeah.
My teacher just came straight out and said, like, this is a song about rape. This is
Oh.
a song about a woman who got raped.
Oh no.
And when you listen to the lyrics, though, it's extremely likely that's the case. It's about, because she says, if you notice, like, he's asking, Annie, are you okay? Her response is, I don't know. I don't know. So, I mean,
Oh
to
my
be honest,
God.
the Alien Ant Farm version of that song is fantastic, but it makes it seem more comedic than it actually is. So
I'll
I
never
just
watch anime music videos the same way again.
was there someone, did someone do like
Smooth Criminal is a popular one for sure.
I just remember Linkin Park being the pick for the most part.
It was Linkin Park, but there was
no.
there was a really good Cowboy Bebop and Trigun one that featured Smooth Criminal. That was a
I gotta look
mashup.
that up.
Yeah, it was
What's
really
wrong?
good.
What's wrong, Eric?
No, I was just going to say, like, are we going to get into Linkin Park discourse on this podcast? Maybe we save that for the
No.
post show.
We sure aren't.
Yeah, I like Linkin Park. Oh, other than what's happening now, but looking back, it's
Noted
like,
Gundam fans, Linkin Park. But
oh shit, that's right. Yeah.
there are numerous songs that I've listened to the lyrics a little too closely and realized that it's about older men who are interested in underage girls.
There's a lot of that.
Were you listening to the?
no.
Were you listening to the Police lately or something?
No, but don't stand so close to me. That's the whole song.
Boy,
Don't
a
stand
girl,
so
you'll be a
close to me.
woman soon. For and such. There's a lot of them actually.
You know what the
Where
worst
you go,
song in the world is?
yeah.
Thirst by John Mayer. I want to kill that song. I want to burn it.
Yeah.
I really like this song about encouraging Eileen to do something. Oh wait,
Come on,
no.
Eileen. Like that scene from Clerks, where he went. Apparently, the actor wouldn't do it in front of the woman. Like he had to kind of do that cut with the porno listing, like saying, "I'm not doing that in front of the woman and the baby." So that's why you see him through that whole listing of terrible porno movies, and not like
we're so deep in the pit. We're so deep in the pit.
Wow, we really went into the pit this week. We really did. No, dig up, stupid.
I was just talking about music. God.
And that's it for this week's episode of Acts of the Blog God. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to end this episode before we get any deeper. We'll be heading to the Acts of the Blood God post show in just a few minutes, where I'm sure that we'll end up getting even deeper into the pit. In the meantime, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us over on Patreon. Just $1 a month will get you access to the show ad-free. You'll get access to our Discord, all of that good stuff. And then at the higher tiers, you get a lot of extra content up to and including being able to hang out with us in the Acts of the Blood God post show. Go check out our Pantheon episode. Go check out our shop, shop.bloodgodpod.com. And lots of other things. We'll be back next week to talk more RPGs. I've been your host, Kat Bailey, and for Eric, Nadia, and myself, thanks for listening. Happy adventuring.